goes through this process of collecting evidence. And they're trying to get data that supports a theory that they may have. And in the end, they have to take it into a judge and a jury and try to convince the jury that this is what actually happened. And they said, this is exactly how science works. Why is the climate warming up? Interesting question. Okay, let's find evidence for the various reasons why that could be happening. It's really detective work and building up evidence, looking at evidence, put it all together, and try to make sense out of it in the end. People have noticed that for the first decade of this century, the warming trend over that decade has been very small. So people say, global warming has stopped. And I say, well, if only you were right about that. It'd be great if global warming had stopped, but it hasn't stopped. The heat's just been going in different places. So when we have pauses in warming, like what we've experienced over the last 10 years or so, what happens is that the ocean circulation takes that heat and puts it in different places. So when we don't see warming at the surface, it's warming up in the deeper ocean. Global warming isn't just a steady rise in temperature. It's kind of up and down, and it's kind of like stair steps. So it'll warm up rapidly and then level off for a while. But over a century, you'll see a gradual increase in temperature over time. Say there was no burning of any coal, oil, or natural gas, and you think, oh, well, the problem would stop. Not that simple, because the oceans take a long time to respond to any change. And so even if you stop today, the oceans would still kind of keep warming up. Say you're in a car and you're driving down the highway. All of a sudden, a stop sign appeared in front of you. You step on the brakes. The car does not stop instantaneously. It takes a while to see the change once you've decided you're actually going to stop. In the end, it does make a difference as to what we do. If we can reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we know that we can stabilize climate. We can get to a level that we can kind of live with. If we don't do anything, it'll just keep warming up indefinitely. I tend to be hopeful. There's still time to do something. We can go to other energy sources that will actually affect future generations 100, 200 years from now. If we do nothing, we get a lot of climate change, a lot of really bad things happen. And the choices we make now can really make a difference. And I really think at some point we're going to make right choices and stabilize the climate at levels that we can live with.
A tropical cyclone is an area of low pressure that forms in the tropical regions of the world. Cyclones are actually very important, even though, of course, they can be deadly. They help essentially balance out the temperature across the globe. They are an equalizer, so they take the heat energy from the tropics and they translate that where we need it into the colder climates. The generic term for it is a tropical cyclone. That can refer to any cyclone that has a closed center of circulation anywhere in the world, like in the Atlantic. When they get strong enough to a certain wind speed, we call them hurricanes. But if you're in the Western Pacific, a hurricane is called a typhoon. There is no difference between a hurricane and a typhoon except in the name. They're both tropical cyclones. The naming system is based on the World Meteorological Organization. There's a list of names. Depending on the basin, in the Atlantic Basin, we recycle the names every 6 years. If a storm becomes particularly intense or is devastating for a coastline or has a lot of casualties associated with it, we retire the name and don't use it again. For example, Hurricane Katrina, that name will never be used again. Once a tropical storm becomes a hurricane, we use what we call the Saffir-Simpson scale. Saffir-Simpson scale categorizes the hurricanes from Category 1, which is the weakest, to a Category 5. A Category 1 minimal hurricane has to have winds in its center of 74 miles an hour. As the storm continues to gather strength and becomes more intense, if it reaches 96 miles an hour, that's a Category 2. A Category 3 has winds of 111 miles per hour. If it continues to intensify, that is a deadly Category 4 storm. And then the strongest of hurricanes, Category 5. That is pretty devastating stuff. definitely heed the warnings. And get yourself a preparedness kit. Know what you're going to do in the event of a cyclone. Are you going to evacuate? When do you evacuate? And